You're listening to the My Simplified Life podcast, and this is episode number 258. Welcome to the My Simplified Life podcast, a place where you will learn that your past and even your present don't define your future. Regardless of what stage of life you're in, I want you to feel inspired and encouraged to pursue your dreams, simplify your life, and start taking action. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac, author of How to Get On Podcasts, the podcast matchmaker, and CEO and founder of the MLG Collective. I'm excited to share the stories and life lessons of changemakers and authors with you while taking you on my own journey. This is My Simplified Life. Hey friends, and welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac, and today I have such a fun interview with Nora Dahlia, the author of Pickup, which is also out today. It is a contemporary romance book, and it was such a fun read. I literally devoured it from a hotel room in New York to the flight back home in California. It was an easy read. It was a fun read. And I love that it not only touches on escapism, like we get to escape as we read this book, but it also has some heavy hitting topics that allow you to think without feeling like you're too much into it. And we're discussing all of that. Nora is now one of my new best friends. She is such a delight and pleasure, and I can't wait for you all to meet her and definitely read Pickup. Hi, Nora.
Hi.
I am so excited to chat with you and to discuss your new book. Happy Pub Day, Pub Week, by the way, because although
Thank
we're recording
you.
this early, it is out now. Can you take a moment and introduce yourself to everybody, please?
My name is Nora Dahlia. My book that just came out is called Pickup. It's a enemies to lovers contemporary romance, and I'm really excited for people to read it.
I devoured it. I had so much fun reading it, and I did tear up. Contemporary romance, and I was like, oh, this is fun. And then there were parts with her mom that I was like, oh, blubbering on the plane. Whenever I can cry on a plane, that's a good book.
Yeah, it's so funny, but isn't it when you cry on a plane, like when you're watching a movie and you accidentally have picked like Dead Poet Society or something and you're weeping next to strangers? Yeah. Oh, I'm so
Yes.
glad. I'm so glad. I mean, I'm not glad to make you cry, but I'm glad it impacted you enough to make you laugh and cry. Yeah.
It's funny. I only recently realized, and I read a lot of books, but when a book has the power to make you cry, like that's really good writing, I feel. And so you should definitely pat yourself on the back because I felt all kinds of emotions with it. And I was rooting for him.
Oh,
Oh, I was rooting
thank
for
you
him.
so much. I'm so glad. Yeah. I mean, me too, as I wrote it. I feel like it's so fun to be able to put yourself in a different world in that way and like escape into these characters and you get like so invested in them. So I'm glad that that comes through.
Can you share a little synopsis of what the book is about without giving spoilers? And then I want to talk about how you got into character. The way you just said that. You can be the character. I'm like, what's your husband think?
You're like, oh, I know. So I actually got the idea for Pickup while I was standing outside of my kids' elementary school after drop off with a bunch of other parents. And we were actually talking about how there wasn't enough salacious gossip at our school, that like our school is very tame, that we keep hearing about other schools like in the area with all these sort of interesting dynamics. And we just are like regular. And I don't know, we just got into a conversation about it. And suddenly I was like, you know what, you guys, I'm going to write a rom-com called Pickup. And it's going to center around school drop off and pickup. And that's what I did. So the book is about two divorced parents who keep interacting in actually sort of negative ways in and around school. And then without giving any spoilers, end up, I don't know how to not even, they end up in a work situation together as well. And it all involves a tropical island. And so then it's just sort of the push pull of like, do I have space for this in my life? can I trust this person after I've had this other relationship that didn't work out? Can I deny the chemistry between us?
There were times where I want to just kind of push Sasha and say, "Can you just go with the guy? Okay, he's adorable, and we all see
Yeah,
it."
yeah. I know there is always that, because you have to create barriers, right? You have to create resistance. Otherwise, there's sort of no story,
Right.
Especially in like an enemies to lovers kind of situation, which is what I tend to gravitate towards. Um, so yeah, so then it's just a question of finding the balance between making it plausible that she wouldn't just give in, versus frustrating the reader.
I was a little frustrated. I'm like, "You just go with him, please."
You're like, we all want it.
Yes, I was like, "Come on, we let's get on with the program, lady." You take us to Turks and Caicos, which I've never been to. Did you get to go?
So I am also a travel writer. Um,
Oh, yes.
yeah,
Now we get the you part. I love
yeah,
it.
yeah. So I spent like the first half of my career as just strictly as a freelance journalist in beauty and fashion and travel and like all things lifestyle. So I have really held on to the travel writing because I get to go to amazing places and write about them. And so that sort of destination was like an amalgamation of a couple different places I've gotten to go to. But one of them was a private island in Turks and Caicos. Um, so it definitely was heavily inspired by that place.
I've been to a private island in the British Virgin Islands.
Was
And so
it Peter Island?
no, it was Necker.
Necker. Oh, you've been
Oh,
to Necker Island.
I've been to
Okay.
Necker. And I definitely felt the whole vibe. Like it was very accurate. I didn't have a Michael, but I did have a nut, there were other staff members who it felt like the same way. And I was like, yes, this is exactly.
Well, it's funny when you're somewhere that is that sort of intimate. There aren't that many people, there's not that much going on, and you're there for an extended period. Like you really do get to know like everyone there, the people who work there, the other guests, like all of that stuff. So it's like a unique experience, I think.
Yes. Our little private island, though, the island off the island was itty bitty bitty bitty. Like you could swim to, well, they said not to swim to it. So we paddleboarded to it.
Huh?
But I was like, it felt very similar. And there was also champagne on that island, too.
How come you couldn't swim to it? I wonder what the deal was.
They just thought it was too rough.
Right.
And I think there was already drinks flowing. So,
Right. They were like, okay, we're trying
yeah,
to keep
safety
everyone.
first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing, though. You had your own little private island on the private
And
island.
I said that I was like, that's my island. Like, I don't know what you all are doing, but this will be my little
This
island.
is
Just,
this is my
yes,
island.
please. It was too much fun.
Yeah,
I
that
loved
sounds
it.
incredible.
I love your aspect on, we have to talk about the VIMs, the
Oh
very
yes,
involved moms.
yes.
I'm totally using it because, we all have them at school.
And we're like, how? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think it was in part a reaction to the fact that as a freelancer, I've always been sort of caught in this weird place between um, like stay-at-home moms who are more available to do those sort of school-related activities, and the women who are working full-time and or parents who are working full-time who really can't make it to those kind of things. I always felt like my schedule sort of was flexible enough to do it, but of course, if you're freelance, if you're not working, nobody's working. So it's kind of a tricky thing. So I think because of that experience, I would sort of watch these other moms who seemed like they had it like all together all the time, and I was like, how are all of the sweets organic? How are, like, how are you doing this? Like, I'd be like, oh, sure, I'll bring something to the bake sale. And I'd like buy it at this crappy supermarket. And they'd be like there with their like, you know, like apple juice instead of sugar, like, whatever it was, like homemade baked goods. So that's sort of the idea for where the VIMs came in. Um, yeah. And
I love
also
the acronym. I'm totally using it. You should trademark it.
maybe I'll make t-shirts like
Oh, I
VIM.
love it. And
VIM.
then ones that say not VIMs. No.
Yes. Like very,
VIMs at home.
instead of very involved moms, it's like very disengaged moms. VD. It's good.
Oh my God, that would be hilarious. You should get these printed before the book
Yeah,
launches.
we're gonna get all right. We're gonna get right after this. I'm gonna get on a call.
Yeah, I love it. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. So what has been the reaction to the parents at school? Have they read it?
No, I'm actually like so nervous about it because I have to tell you, Michelle, like this, I wrote this book. I always joke with my husband that I have no imagination. Like I write about places I've been to or places I live, or like my characters. I mean, my characters are really amalgamations of like many, many people. They're not like
Hmm.
one person, but the settings and all of that kind of stuff, like the jobs, they're all things that like I've done or someone close to me has done or I've experienced myself. So I wrote this book not realizing, because it's my first romance, that I was going to need to like add real sex to it. Like I sort of was like I tried to write it with like that closed door thing where like they kiss and then the door closes kind of thing. Um, and then it became clear to me that that was not going to be a possibility. So I had to like spice it up. And then I was like, oh my God, I feel like I've written this book that's like about my neighborhood and like it has like kids, like my kids' ages. And I'm like, it's my supermarket and my running loop in Prospect Park where everything takes place. And now it's like, a little raunchy.
And the quote that stands out is, "I will never look at the side table the same way again."
Exactly.
Oh, I
Well,
read the whole book, and that part was on the plane, and I'm like, "Oh,
you
I
were
hope
like,
the mom." There was a mom next to me with her 2-year-old, and I'm like, "Oh, she's falling asleep. She's missing out over here. You might want to read over my shoulder."
yeah, you're like, check this out. Yeah, so I have one friend at school, parent friend, like mom friend at school who has read it. Actually, two, and they're both romance readers. One of them is like a romanticy person, and the other one reads more like contemporary romance, like this. And they both were like, "It's not as crazy as you think. It's not like like they almost were like, you could spice it up more." So,
That
so
always
we'll
makes you
see.
wonder, though, if they're listening, what are you all doing at home?
No, exactly, exactly. So yeah, so I am like a little bit nervous, but hopefully, I mean, I guess as my mother would say, I should be so lucky as to have that problem because that would mean everyone read it.
Right. Well, they better all read it. There should be like a PTA book club or a VIM
A
book club.
VIM book club, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All the VIMs need to get together, read this book.
And maybe have a support group because
I love it. I love
because it
it.
also deals with like the stresses of motherhood and in that way.
Yes. Yes. And I loved, we won't, I don't spoil. So I don't think this is spoiling, but the recognition of just being called mom at school and then
Yeah.
the realization later on, of other staff members too. It, I love the way it comes about, towards the end of what everybody recognizes. I'll put it that way. That doesn't spoil it, but it
No,
kind of touches on we want to be recognized as something more
yeah.
than mom. And I think that often gets overlooked.
Yeah. It's so funny. Like, I feel like at some point during like I lost a friend like a few years ago, and during the grieving process for that, like in the frustration of like the competitive grieving between all of like the friends and whatever, somebody said to me, everybody just wants to be seen. Like everybody just wants to feel seen. And that stayed with me so much, like for everything. And it just like applies across the board so much.
Hmm.
And that's such a funny thing, isn't it? That like you're that they just call you mom, that they're like, hey mom, and at first maybe you're like, that's cute. And then you're like, but do you actually know the difference between me and like that person?
Yeah.
Do we have an identity beyond like being a snack dispenser over here? Because I used to. And I think
Right.
that's really like what the root of the book is about. Um, like once upon a time, we all had identities that had nothing to do with having kids or being moms.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we were like wild, or maybe we weren't, or whatever we were doing, like we were doing it, as ourselves and not with like various appendages.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then we become moms and our identity shifts so extremely. And then as our kids get older, the question starts to arise like, well, how do we settle back into something that's more about like us and who we are, and who are we the same person still? And
Yeah.
like, can we be?
You touch on so many different things. We talk about romance and all of the spiciness, but you do touch on these things. I just interviewed yesterday Stephanie Harrison on New Happy, and
Uh-huh.
she says everybody wants to be happy, and if we
Yeah.
all look at it from that perspective of you just want to be happy, what can we do to help each other be happy? We can listen and whatnot. And then I also, the way you portray these husbands, the dads, the ex-husbands, it's like Eve Rodsky in Fair Play, who's doing what at home,
Right.
and at what point does that recognition then fall on the dad to go, oh yeah, I should be doing something else and picking up and doing more? And does it happen when it's too late in a marriage?
Right.
And does it
Right.
happen at all?
Right. Yeah. And it's an interesting question because also, like, I guess in the little Brooklyn bubble, there in where I live, there are like dads that are like more like the stay-at-home moms,
Mhm.
who don't work while their wives have sort of big corporate jobs. And it's not every couple, but it's more common than probably in a lot of other places. So then that like it sort of suggests all of these different or raises all these different questions about identity too, and like gender roles and all that stuff. But I do think that everybody just wants to be happy is a good point. And that is actually what motivated me to write a romance, because I was like, in COVID, I basically couldn't read any. I was like, I can't read all of a sudden. I know a lot of our reading habits shifted during COVID. Like, I think
All
that happened.
habits. All habits.
All habits, exactly.
Yeah.
Everything. Um, and I just could not read. And then I have a really dear friend who is a very successful romance novelist. Sarah McLean is her name. Um, and I started reading her books. And then I was like, oh, I can only read her books. So for 6 months, I just like lost myself in all of her books, which are like historical romance, often with like a girl gang. And like, it's cool. And it's just was like fun and escapist and all of these things. So then when I thought about writing this book, I was like, everyone just wants to escape.
Mm.
Like,
Mhm.
I just want to escape too. Like, why don't I just, create something that does that job, that gives us a place to like sink into, like a happy place.
Yeah, and that's probably why I devoured it, because I felt like I was escaping somewhere else,
Uh-huh.
even though I actually was, and I was flying across the country. But
Right.
it definitely provided that escape, and the different characters all have these different situations going on at home. So you could put yourself in each one a little bit, regardless of whether you're married, you're separated, you're divorced. There was a part of, I felt like, me in each character.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's probably true for me too in writing them, right? Like, how else do you actually get to the depth of what makes a person tick, if not because you understand a portion of it, or you relate to some part of it.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad that that resonated for you in that way. Like that makes me feel like I at least kind of did my job.
Oh, you did. You made me cry too. There was some blushing, there was some crying. It was good.
What more can you ask for? No, I'm so glad that was the case. And yeah, I mean, the world is an intense place right now.
Just a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it feels like anytime you can just kind of like, take a minute, it's self-care, I think, you know?
Yeah. And there was also a part in the book that um I would say controversial, I guess would be the word I would use, in which, you're waiting as the reader to see who's going to stand up against this one character. Will they stand up? And, you know, the readers have to go read it. But
Yeah.
you hit on it, and I was so happy. I'll just no spoilers, everybody, but I really enjoyed that approach was included as well. And I think that for being a book that's supposed to be romantic and fun, you hit on heavy topics without making them feel hugely heavy and like burdensome for the reader.
Oh, good. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's the balance I was trying to strike. I mean, my sister like read it. My sister's always like the first person to read my drafts, basically. And she's my big sister, you know. Um, so I need her approval. But she but she read it and she was like, "Well, you pulled a Nora," meaning that like um I said I was going to write something light and like a romance, and then I threw in all of this like gender politics and whatever else.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't help myself.
I was like, yeah, because I think it also makes you think. Like, here we are, we're escaping, we're having fun, and then you're like, don't forget that real life is still here.
Well, actually, like, and I think that those kind of details also make it feel more real and like
Hmm.
relatable. But um, also, I was at a romance event not that long ago, and like since I started writing this, I started and reading more romance. I started going to events, which are like so fun because everybody's just like in a place of wanting to like be happy and laugh and you know like drink wine and whatever. It's just like a very nice thing. Um, but one of the things that they talked about, which I thought was fascinating, is that because romance novels come out more quickly than other books, like other like publishers take longer to put out like literary fiction or whatever it would be. But most romance novelists write a book a year, and the readership is like very, very voracious. Because of that, romance is able to reflect the contemporary culture, like the current culture, in a way that other books can't, because the other books are just longer lead. So the culture has shifted or changed over that time. Um, that was like so fascinating to me, and I really love
Yeah.
the idea of that. Especially because I've always been interested in like sort of adding like cultural cues and whatever to what I write.
Hmm.
I thought that was such an interesting like revelation.
That is fascinating. I didn't realize that, and so now I'm gonna have to read more.
I know. Well, and it's really interesting too. Like a lot of the romance novelists really think of themselves as like political in certain ways, you know?
Well, and books, this is because of the time that we're in. Books are political. And
Yeah.
I've seen posts where people are like, oh, books aren't political. And right now we should all read books and be happy. And well, no, books are being banned. Books are very political. Books can
Books are
teach
being,
lessons
yeah,
without throwing it in your face and being present to make you think, without, so many people don't experience or recognize certain things, and yet a book can allow you to be in that place, to have that experience, to open your eyes to other things. Yeah, they're very political, so I
totally.
agree.
Yeah. To put yourself, yeah. And that's such a good point, in the position of a person whose like life you might not otherwise ever understand. Yeah.
Right. And
Such a,
I feel that way with podcasts. Like, we get to talk to other people who have these experiences that we wouldn't otherwise get to hear. But,
yeah.
also to read it in a book is also a different experience, where, I think that maybe the empathetic part, it won't be as strong, but because you don't hear it in that person's own words, but it
Right.
still allows you to recognize what is actually happening to other people, what they've
Yeah.
experienced.
Yeah. In between makeout sessions.
Yes. And so that way you can be like, oh, I'm thinking, oh, okay, I can stop thinking for a
Yeah.
minute.
I'll take a break. I'll take a break.
I love it. Take me back to the freelance stuff. What were you doing before you wrote this amazing book that is now out?
um,
Because I know there's other books too.
yes. So I was a freelance journalist for many years, as I said. Um, and I did like also as many freelance journalists do, like a lot of like brand work with different fashion and beauty lines and whatever. Um, and then I decided I wanted to try to write a novel. Um, and so I did. And I had really never written fiction. I mean, even as a kid, when I was like editor of my literary magazine or whatever, I always wrote personal essay, um, and like creative nonfiction, like humor essays, basically. Um, but I was like, I just need to try to do something different than all of the sort of newspaper and magazine stuff I was doing. Um, Oh, actually, this is going to come full circle because I had the idea for my first novel while I was on Peter Island in the British Virgin Islands, private island.
I love it. We all
Um,
go back to the BBI.
yeah, exactly. Um, but anyway, that started me writing more like a market commercial fiction, like sometimes referred to as women's fiction. Um, and so I wrote a few different books. Like I wrote three books. In that genre, um and then I started also book coaching and ghostwriting, um and collaborating on books, and I co-wrote a nonfiction book about this sort of seminal, is sort of an odd word, but sexual assault that sort of at the sort of beginning of when social media became like a prominent thing in our culture, and sort of the interplay between those two pieces. And so I did that, and then I was like, I'm gonna need to lighten it up. So then I sat down to write this, which I'm writing under the name Nora Dahlia, which is like my romance writing name.
I love it. And then are you working on another one now? Now that this baby's born, is the next one coming?
It is, because it's romance. And so that's the great thing is, yeah, I'm working on another one now, um, which is also an enemies to lovers, and sort of has a similar vibe where it's hopefully like funny, but also like poignant, one hopes. Yeah.
Are you going to do one a year? Is that your hope now that you've pushed one
Yeah.
out?
I would, if they let me, I absolutely will. I would love to just keep doing it. It's like the most fun. It's
And
the
how do you find that now you are a mom? For all who have not caught on yet, she is a mom.
best.
How do you find the time to, I mean, one year, I've had guests on who have said, I've taken 2 decades, I've taken 5 years, I've taken all of this time. How do you fit in writing a full novel in a year and pushing this out?
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky to be a pretty fast writer. And maybe that's just from also like honed after years of just writing every day, basically. I also write from a place of anxiety, so I'm just really fast, maybe because I'm just trying to get a draft out. I find it like much less stressful to have a draft, even if it's really messy, than to be starting from scratch. Um, I wrote Pickup actually after I was joking, but I guess I'm sort of not joking. I wrote Pickup after a period of not writing fiction for kind of a while. And I, at that time, was collaborating on and ghostwriting for different books, but in addition to that assault book, like a book, a memoir about the Holocaust, a couple other like really intense topics. And at that time, I found it really difficult to focus on fiction, my own fiction stuff.
Mhm.
And so I basically like suddenly finished up all of these projects, and I had like a gap in time. And it was like, oh, because because also that's when I had the idea for Pickup. It was just like it was like the right time. And so I just like intensely sat down and wrote like the whole book in like a couple months, which is what I sort of tend to do.
That's amazing.
And then I have to, I mean, then it's a mess and I have to rewrite it 850 times, but um, so yeah, so that was how I wrote Pickup. And then the second one, I wrote this summer in a similar kind of flurry.
Oh, I need those flurries because I will do a flurry and I'll be like, oh my gosh, I did 2,000 words in a day. And then I go, okay, now I haven't written in a month.
Right.
Uh,
It's really hard. Well, actually, I wrote my very first book, I wrote during National Novel Writing Month. Have you
oh
ever?
yeah, right?
Mhm.
NaNoWriMo? Yes, this month.
NaNoWriMo?
That's November, although this
Yeah.
airs in December. Yes, November.
Yes. And so, yeah. And so for anyone who doesn't know, like it's basically the idea is that you're meant to write, I think it's like 1,677 or something like that, words a day for a month. And then by the end of the month, and you're not meant to like outline or edit or stop. And at the end of the month, you have like a very messy draft in an ideal world. But it's a sort of short book, but so maybe you don't. But anyway, um, that's how I wrote my first book. And I found that to be like a really helpful structure for me, um, because I didn't necessarily write like 1,700 words a day, but I made myself write every day, even if it was like a sentence.
Mm,
And what I find is just that, like, the more time you spend away from whatever the project is, the scarier it gets to
sure.
reapproach.
Yeah.
So that didn't allow me to stop. It didn't allow me to get to that point that everyone gets to in whatever book they're working on, where they're like, this was a terrible idea. Everything I'm doing sucks. Like, why am I even doing this? I'm just going to scrap it. You're not allowed to do that. Um, Also, they have like a website you can sign up on and it gives you like a graph. So you're actually like, also you get to, you get to watch the graph grow. So for whatever reason that like really works for me. So even when it's not November and I'm writing a book, like I sort of write in that way. Um,
Hmm.
and I got lucky with this, not pickup, but this new one, this next one, because it turned out, and it felt like fate, that they do like, now they do like a NaNoWriMo camp in July.
Yes. Well, and anyone who's a parent did not invent NaNoWriMo November because November, we just talked about there's parent teacher conferences and there's half days for a week and there's Veterans Day and then there's Thanksgiving. Like, who's writing when the kids are home nonstop?
That's such a good point. That's such a good point. Yes, November is the nightmare. I know. It really should be like, except it's short. It should be like February, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Although there's now like ski week and, they're just
yeah,
creating
we have
these
February
weeks
break.
off. So,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't know, but yeah, the July was kind of brilliant because I was in for a big portion of the month. I was in at my in-laws' house in Maryland. My kids were in camp, and I could sit in the little office there, and I could just work, and everybody let me, so that was nice.
that sounds nice. What has your one last question? What's your husband say about the fun scenes?
Well, first of all, he read like an earlier draft, and he was like, he called me on like the fact that I was doing the closed door kind of thing. Like he was like, "But you're doing all this lead up, and then like you don't get to ever see the sex. Like, what is the point?" So he was supportive in that regard. My husband is he's a writer. He's actually a graphic novelist, and he writes actually YA and children's graphic novels. Um, but he is also a filmmaker. Um, and so when I told my editor that the first time that we met, actually, she said to me, "Oh, so how does he feel about the fact that you made the ex-husband like a filmmaker?" And I was like, "Oh, I did think that." I didn't even think about it. It's just that, as I said, I always just draw on whatever like career I actually don't have to do any research on because I already know exactly what it entails, you
Yeah.
know? Um, so I came home and I told him that she had said that, and he said, and I said, that she had said, like, does he mind? And he said, well, I actually kind of minded a little bit. And he said,
Oh.
and I was like, well, why didn't you say anything? And he said, because I think the book is really good, and I don't want you to mess it up because of that.
Oh, that's sweet.
So that was,
That's pretty funny though.
yeah, yeah.
Your
I was
poor
like,
husband.
I
Oh.
know, I know, but he's definitely not a Cliff. He's
No, I
definitely
was just going to say he's not Cliff. No way. No.
he's
Cliff's
definitely
a douchebag.
yeah, yeah, exactly, precisely.
Oh, I adore you. Oh my goodness. You're going to have to come back for your next book too,
Same, I would
because I'm
love.
going to devour all of them from here on out.
Oh, thank you. Was so fun. It was so fun to talk to you. Like I could just talk to you forever. So,
Me too. Thank you. Where can everybody find you and where can they buy Pickup?
okay, well, you can buy Pickup at all the stores. I mean, not all the stores, but like the standard stores, and hopefully lots of indies as well. Um, and you can find me on Instagram under Nora Dahlia Zelavansky, which is my full name. And also on my website, which is the same, Nora Dahlia Zelavansky. If you can figure out how to
Amazing.
spell it.
I'll put it in the show notes, so you don't have to spell it, everybody.
Yeah. But
Thank
definitely,
you.
I just want to say it's such a good like escapist read for the holidays. So if you have like a vacation coming up or someone you want to give a book for a vacation, I recommend.
Yes,
That's my
because it's going to be cold and it will take you to warm places, and you
Mhm.
can literally finish it between your flights in a hotel room.
Yes.
Promise.
Yes.
Thank you so much and congratulations, Nora.
Thank you so much. And this was so fun.
That was so much fun. I literally could have just left the recording and gotten a glass of wine or a cup of coffee with Nora. And I can't wait for us to have more conversations, to read her next book. And I highly encourage you, especially as we're going into December and it's cold, if you want to go escape to the beach, Turks and Caicos, definitely pick up today. And remember that life all around you is stuff that can also be put into a book. So I think that you're going to enjoy this, especially if you are a parent, if you experience pickups and drop offs, if you want to add a little bit of drama to those stories of those strangers you don't know. This is the perfect read. I'm so glad that I got to meet Nora, that we've connected, and can't wait to share more of what she's doing with all of you.